When I made my first digital maps in the 80s, car navigation was science fiction. I actually remember the looks in the eyes of my neighbor. There was looks like, you won't live here very long, when I explained them that cars would actually talk to you and tell you how to drive from A to B, and that I was intending to make a living out of making sure that the maps were there that enabled those systems. Now 30 years have passed, and wow, what an evolution. Fortunately, I was a bit right, and cars do speak, and they tell you how to drive from A to B, but more than that, maps are everywhere. So I'm the happiest map guy in the world, having had the privilege to basically stay close to all that evolution, steer some of that. But I was really amazed when my new neighbor, I did move, but for the better, when my new neighbor actually had that same look in his eyes when I told him that maps would not only tell you how to drive from A to B, but maps would allow, and cars would actually drive you from A to B. And again, we would make a living out of the fact that we would have to solve the problem, how on earth are you producing the map information for such highly automated driving systems? And it's not a coincidence that actually it's the car industry, if you look at the world of mapping, it's the car industry that actually triggered twice in a row, with car navigation first and highly automated driving now, an enormous change in that map industry. And this will happen again. It's happening as we speak, actually. Which brings me to the subject, what I want to tackle here in only 20 minutes, and there's much more time needed to do that, but anyway, I only got 20 minutes, is to answer the question, what do map makers need in order to find a solution for the challenge of creating highly automated driving maps, and making sure, by doing so, that highly automated driving is not a vision for the far future, but is actually real, and it's going to happen soon. Let me take you back to the old days. Maybe some of you recognize these things, because by now they are things. But in the old days, maps were delivered to the end user on static media, on CDs first, DVDs later on, hard disks much later. And weirdly enough, still today, map updating is actually done in a batch process. It's periodically updating your map or not updating your map, and the frequency goes up. So in the old days, you updated your map once a year, then once every 3 months, once a month, once a week. It's not a coincidence that actually plenty of map makers, well-known map makers, actually have batch systems to produce maps and to update maps. And those batch systems are fully aligned with that kind of delivery of maps. But unfortunately, those batch systems are not fully aligned with today's requirements of the end users and of the car industry. What we see is that we live in what I would call the smartphone generation. The smartphone generation is actually the generation that is always on, that is always connected, that takes for granted that the information is at their fingertips and is always up to date. It's the notion of batch is a foreign notion for the modern person. If I talk to my kids, try to explain them what batch systems are, they look with glazy eyes as if I was talking about black and white television, which they originally thought, why would you take out the color? And the same is true for batch. I mean, they think, why would not everything be online? Why would not everything be up to date the moment we need it. That's what we need, that's what we want, and forget about all the rest. Now, some things have not changed. The car industry, fortunately, has still tremendous high requirements with regard to quality. Quality is and will become, even in the future with highly automated driving, an absolute must. There's no discussion about it. In the old days with navigation, you know, navigation nice to have, we're all addicted to it, but it's not a basic information infrastructure component of the car, which it is when we talk about highly automated driving. And that changes things fundamentally. Now, there's plenty of discussions around the fact what will become the dominant form factor, what will become the dominant device. And I think it's a bit of a non-discussion, actually. I think if you look at the modern users, the modern user isn't picking a device in function of an application. It picks this device for this application, this device for another application. What the modern user actually wants is that all his devices can be used seamlessly, and that one application travels with you over all the different devices so that you can make use of the form factor that suits you best. That and nothing else will actually optimize the user experience. That's, by the way, also the reason why we announced a couple of days ago that we have the technology to make sure that synchronization can happen continuously. Now, if you have a look at the car, then a lot of things have changed in cars, and a lot of things will further change in cars. But one of the most remarkable things is that the amount of sensors in the car, and I'm sure you have talked about this plenty of times during this conference, will increase tremendously. And with that, the volume of information that is available in the car will increase exponentially. Now, that is both an opportunity and a challenge. It's an opportunity because thanks to all that information, we can make cars much more clever, which is an absolute must if we want to implement highly automated driving. But there's a second thing, is that that information within the car is not only important for that car itself, but also contains a fortune of information that is important to other cars. And you have to find a way to basically synchronize that information, take the best out of it that is relevant for the other cars, and communicate it instantaneously also to the other cars. And the best way to do that is making sure that you do that through the map, because the map has exactly the same components in it as the car's intelligence with regard to the highly automated driving requisites. Now, if you do that, you create an enormous challenge as well. It's an opportunity, but it's a huge, big challenge, because the amount of information that we have available to produce maps will grow stellarly. I mean, there's no limits to that information growth in the future, definitely not with the sensors. So basically, if you look at all those requirements, and I don't think I've said anything spectacular or out of the blue, you ask yourself, and that's what we did about 4 years ago. I could have given this speech 4 years ago when we asked ourselves at TomTom, what on earth do we need to do to be fit for that future? How do we combine all those user requirements, all those system requirements, and come up with a solution that produces the highly automated driving map? And we asked ourselves, what are the requirements? What are the must-have requirements of an adequate map-making platform? And at a very high level, we came up with 3 of them. The first one is, you cannot neglect quality. You cannot cut corners on quality. That is not acceptable. That might be acceptable for many applications, but not for this one. Highly automated driving is a synonym of having quality information. So the architecture of your map producing platform needs to guarantee that today and in the future, the number of requirements on quality goes up and that you can handle that. The second requirement is all of that information needs to be real-time. And what I mean by real-time is that all that information needs to be processed in seconds, if possible, and delivered to the car, to the systems, to the end users. Real-time is an absolute must. Forget about batch systems. You can mimic real-time with batch systems by throwing resources at it and reducing or increasing the frequencies from months to weeks, maybe to days, but never to seconds. It's impossible. If your architecture is batch, you're doomed. And the third one, it's a big one too, is you have to produce that in a very efficient way, because plenty of naysayers with regard to highly automated driving have actually said, yes, but it will be unaffordable. Just like in the old days that they said, making a navigable map globally is unaffordable. And I have to agree, it's expensive. And I have to agree that highly automated driving maps will be expensive, but not unaffordable. And the way to do that is making sure by a high degree of automation that your map production system is efficient. Now, 4 years ago, we sat with those three things and we said, well, this is the holy grail of mapping. If you achieve that, then you have an architecture in your map-making platform that allows you to further grow the three elements, all of them together. Because if you drop one of those three, and there's plenty of examples of that in our industry, if you drop one of those three requirements, then suddenly map making becomes relatively easy. And I'll give you an example. If you say, well, let's forget about high quality, we build a crowdsourced map production platform with the assumption that all the users will actually make the map as good as possible. Now, we know that that does not and will not achieve the high quality requirements of the car industry, let alone be fit for purpose for highly automated driving. It is impossible, and the simple reason why it is impossible is because the assumption is wrong. The assumption that all users, that the full crowd has actually only one goal and one goal only, to improve the map, is wrong. There's plenty of people that have other intentions. That's, by the way, one of the reasons why Google took offline the map-making platform, because there was too much fun in the maps. We can't have crap in the maps when we talk about highly automated driving. So if you drop the real time, for example, you keep high quality, you keep efficient, but you take your time to produce it and you use all kinds of offline batch systems to do that, then yes, it's doable, right? It's expensive, but it's doable. But again, it doesn't deliver the goodies for highly automated driving. And the last one, if you drop the efficiency, you assume that by throwing money at map making, you can actually win the race. And frankly, although throwing money at something changes things, I agree with that, but the amount of money you have to throw at it if your system is inefficient is just, even for the guys with deep pockets, is unaffordable. So with that, we started 4 years ago building the system, and we weren't quiet on it. I'm sure most of you have not heard about that technology development, and the simple reason for it was we were afraid. We were afraid that this system could not be built. It has never been done before, and you know, even if you know a bit about mapping, it is quite a challenge to produce that. We finally got to the level that we have the right architecture, that we have in the meantime developed the system that was the biggest software project ever in our company, and it works. Right? And now I'm on stage telling you, yes, we're there. right? Now, a map-making system is never finished. Let's face it, it is never done, and there will be plenty of changes in the future, but not to any of those three requirements. If I go a bit in detail and on very high level, explain you why that system is unique. The first thing, if you look at the bottom, so it's all about reducing the cycle time. Now, what is the cycle time? The cycle time is simple. It's a bit of a difficult word, explaining that the time between a change in reality, going fully through the process and delivering it back to the end user, that's what we call the cycle time. And the architecture of your map-making system has to be such that in principle you can reduce that cycle time for any transaction, on any feature, on any attribute to virtually zero. Will you be able to do that? For some, you can do that very quickly. For other features or attributes, you cannot do that very quickly, but your architecture needs to be fit for purpose and allow you to reduce that cycle time, while you do not give anything away on quality, and that makes it difficult. Now, the basis of that system is actually transactional. What that means is a very simple way of saying that each and every single transaction on the map goes through the whole cycle independent of other transactions. So there's no notion anymore of bulk processing, batch processing. Each individual transaction goes through the system individually, makes the full circle, and gets back delivered to the end user. If you think about that, that actually means that each and every transaction creates a new version of the database, and that each new version of the database is instantaneously releasable. So your database is in a continuous state of release. That means that instead of having update versions every week or every day, you have between 500,000 and 1 million versions a day, right? And each of them can be accessed by the end user, or alternatively, because it's transactional, you can easily see which transactions have happened, and through incremental updating, deliver that information to your end user. Now, in order to do that, you basically need new standards. Unfortunately, we have the NDS standard, and the NDS standard allows for incremental update, and the whole system is built taking that into account. Another thing is that when we talk about intelligent map making, and that has been proven over and over again, map making is not about using one source and one source only. You never achieve the quality and you never achieve the speed. Map making is about combining different sources, and actually through combination of different sources finding out what the reality is. We call that fusion. Fusion engines are a part of the architecture, and there's no end to the amount of fusion engines you can have. Give you a very simple example. If a one-way restriction changes, then you might know that because of a user report. You might check that with the probe data you have. You might even look at the image recognition that you have done through the analysis of the images of your mobile mapping vans. All of that should be done automatically, and that's where we use the fusion engines. So a transactional system as such can do fusion for any single transaction. For any single change in reality, we can complete the full process. And in each step of the way, we actually look at the quality. We have a massive amount of online quality rules. In the old days, those quality rules were not online, and we basically checked the full database right before we released it. Now, we basically check each and every transaction in its own right, whether it is passing the tests or not passing the tests, and actually leads to a change of the database. Now, highly automated driving is a vision that we have known since the 50s. And still today you have nicer pictures than you had before. But bottom line is, highly automated driving brings the map and the car much more closer to each other. And there's no way we're going to develop highly automated driving within a reasonable time frame and within a reasonable cost unless we have the platform I was talking about. But there's a second thing. We also need to be very close to the car industry, to you. And the reason for that is that highly automated driving, the interaction between the sensors, the intelligence in the car and the map is huge. Maps allow the car to see beyond the sensors because there's all kinds of theories, including theories where you say that highly automated driving would not need a map, that the sensors in its own right could actually give you enough information. Now, most specialists agree on the fact that that is not going to happen for the simple reason that sensors might be blocked, sensors might not see far enough, but more importantly, you have to have the means of transferring the results of that sensor information into something that is usable not only for that car but for multiple cars. And a very nice example is what we patented, that is what we call the road DNA. So with our mobile mapping vans and other sensor information that we collect, we actually make a road DNA, which makes it much easier for cars to know exactly, and with much more detail than GPS, to know where they are. Right. Now, that can be based on sensor information that is also coming out of the car. So where and the simple comparison there is, probe data comes out GPS, comes out plenty of GPS systems. Because of that, we have a very accurate traffic information. Because of that, we know accurately where cars can drive, where they not can drive, how fast they drive, and so on and so on. Now just extrapolate that to other sensors, and you will see that that gives an enormous opportunity. Staying close to the automotive industry means that you start researching together with that automotive industry. We have a couple of important research and development projects. Probably you heard about the car that was driving from San Francisco to CES in Las Vegas, the Audi car. Well, that was equipped with our highly automated driving map. And I'm happy to say that there is a highly automated driving map of the Detroit area, so that people in the room that want to check whether I'm just singing a song or whether it's real can have the opportunity to do that. In short, because I need to stop here, in short, real-time maps, that's what it's about. I used to call it plenty of times and long time ago the holy grail of mapping. It's a map that is continuously up to date and that is correct. Right. Today, connected cars need the most accurate map. And that means that having a global map of high quality is sufficient to satisfy the car industry. And actually, that is not true for highly automated driving. Having a global navigable map of high quality is kind of table stakes in a very high-stake game. But having the right platform that actually satisfies the three major requirements that I've talked about, that is what's going to make the difference in the future. That's the only way we're ever going to produce the highly automated driving map. So TomTom is not here. TomTom is already there. Thank you very much.